Hannah Murray. TRE in the afternoon.
Good afternoon. Joining us on the line now is Joel Best. He's a professor of sociology and criminal justice. In his new book, Just the Facts, Untangling Contradictory Claims, he turns his eye towards the social construction of what we think is true. He evaluates how facts emerge from our social worlds, including our beliefs, values, tastes and norms, and how they align with those world standards. Welcome to the show, Joel.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. So this is a fascinating subject. What made you do all this research and write a book about it?
Well, it seemed to me that people are arguing a lot about facts, and they tend to get really emotional about it. They're outraged that anybody would challenge their facts. And I thought it might be worth taking a look at where facts come from and how we evaluate them.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because a fact should be true, which is obviously why it's called a fact. But, in recent years, all the fake news and fact checking and expressions that we hear a lot of, it's very difficult sometimes to know what is fact.
Right. And what you need to understand is that facts are social. They're produced by people. They don't exist out there independently in the universe. And that's how we tend to think about them. We tend to think that they're little nuggets of truth that we've picked up someplace. But in fact, in reality, what's happened is that people have, using standards that, they accept, decided that something is true. And, take right now, if we look at our clocks, we know what time it is, and we can say that's a fact. Mm-hmm. But actually, it's a fact that we've all agreed to use the same system of timekeeping. There's nothing in nature that says it's, such and such a time.
No. And facts can be, end up not being true, something that we're led to believe to be facts. Then somebody can look into it and say, actually, this isn't true anymore. Things to do with health, that happens all the time. New research is being done. And, we used to believe that certain things are bad for us. Now they're not as bad as we think, or sometimes the other way round. That seems to happen all the time.
Sure. There's new evidence that is brought into play, and we have to be very careful and evaluate that evidence because, there oftentimes people are trying to sell us something and say, well, this is what you ought to be eating or whatever. So, the whole point is that you need to think critically about people saying that this or that is a fact.
And I guess also the source, where the source is coming from, and if there's a hidden agenda there, that's always an interesting one. But again, it's difficult to know where the hidden agendas are.
That's right. And so you cannot just go through the world blindly assuming that something's a fact because people tell you it's a fact. You need to, if it becomes an issue, you need to kind of take a moment and say, well, what is this based on? Where does this information come from? How was it gathered? Am I convinced that this is the correct way to determine facts?
Yeah, it's always good, I think, to do your own research into things, whether it's to do with health things or things that we're told in the news, things that we might read in newspapers, certainly things that we're reading on social media, as opposed to believing any of those things are facts necessarily.
Yeah, facts get revised, facts get changed, and this happens even in science. When people started saying that, the planets not the planets, the continents are moving apart. That was seen as ridiculous originally, and now geologists understand that yes, the continents are moving constantly, and they're not moving very much, but we need to understand the world better. But even science changes over time as we get more and better information.
Yeah. Take smoking as a great example. Many decades ago, people were told that smoking is okay. There were adverts saying, oh, relax, have a cigarette. And even doctors many decades ago would say, oh, if you're a bit stressed, have a cigarette and things like that. And yet more and more research has found that there is nothing at all good for you about smoking.
Yeah, I think those doctors were mostly paid by tobacco companies.
Yeah. But again, you'd assume that the doctors know the facts, wouldn't you? That's an interesting point.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah. So what kind of things did you discover then researching for this? Did you come across all kinds of different things that you weren't aware of before?
I did. I learned things. I would go down little rabbit holes of one sort or another, and I would learn that things that I'd taken for granted were upon closer inspection, subject to criticism, to critical thinking. One of the things that happens all the time is that the government will announce, there's some statistic. The economy added this many jobs last quarter or last month or whatever. And what we a lot of times we don't realize, but the government actually presumes that those numbers are wrong. That is, they schedule a revision, and there's, after a month or two, they produce a revised figure, which is probably more accurate. And after another couple months, they actually may produce another revised figure, a revision of the revision. And all the time, the first story is the one that we hear, but that's actually the least accurate of these estimates. And we value that first story because we want the information right now. We want to know what happened last month. But we're actually going to know better what happened if we wait for the revisions.
Yeah. And when we're told about news items, whether it's on the television or in a newspaper or somebody in a pub telling you, oh, this is something that's happening in the world, and giving you information as if it's fact, how should we go about distinguishing whether it's fact or just their opinion?
Well, I think the question is, how do we know that? How do we? And it's not necessarily, sometimes we can say, well, this person has credentials, and usually people with those credentials can be trusted. But ultimately, what you'd really like to know is, how did they come to this conclusion? What did they do? And, sometimes you can discover that the information is a little shaky. And of course, sometimes the information is, well, of course this is true. We all know this is true. Everybody in my group believes this is true. And that's really not much in the way of evidence. I think that we've come to value evidence more than we did a few centuries ago. In the good old days, you went to a holy book, or what did Aristotle say? And you assumed that those were the authorities. And now we tend to think that, no, you ought to have something more than ancient opinion to decide that something's factual.
Yeah. It's also interesting. Different people will trust different sources. If you're, some people trust the news implicitly and will say, well, it's in a newspaper, so therefore it's true. The journalists would have done their work, done their research, and for them to be going on television and telling us the news is obviously true. Other people's will say, oh, just because it's in the news, it doesn't mean it's true. Same with science, trusting the science. If it's in the British Medical Journal, for example, it must be true because scientists will have done the research. But other people say, oh, no, it doesn't necessarily mean it's true at all. It's because people have different reasons to trust different sources or not.
That's absolutely right. And we, you can have, you aren't necessarily going to resolve every dispute with critical thinking, but at least you can, clarify the terms. You don't have to start by getting outraged. You can say, well, where does your information come from? What's the basis for that? This is where my information come from. That's where the basis is. And, if you have two people that are looking at, ideologically, different news sources, ultimately you can say, well, gee, your guy says this, my guy says that. And I personally find that this evidence is more powerful. I mean, you got to do that. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work to figure out what's fact.
Definitely. Well, it's a fascinating subject. And if listeners want to get a copy of Just the Facts, it's out now. It's available on our website, TRE.radio, and it's by Joel Best. Joel, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks. It was a pleasure.